PorkFest 2024. Guys, if you ever feel like you're under pressure, just remember, you didn't have to speak after Ron Paul. No pressure at all, of course. I do want to say something about Dr. Paul. How many people here were brought to the Liberty Movement by Ron Paul? Yeah. You'll notice I had my hand raised too. Who here was young when he did that? Yeah, me too. You'll notice I'm not young anymore, and a lot of the people who raise their hand also aren't young. In fact, I'm starting to really think we need to really consider the kind of world we're leaving behind for Dr. Paul. No, but seriously, I still meet people today in their teens and 20s who say that Dr. Paul brought them to the Liberty Movement. So we definitely owe that man a tremendous debt of gratitude. So you can apply 100%. This is my first PorkFest, and I gotta say, I wish I had been coming here all along, guys. This is absolutely amazing. I have made a point of walking up and down just about the entire thing since I've been here, and I am seeing people from all different walks of life, all over the country. In fact, people from other countries as well. Got one right there. And everyone's doing different types of things. Some people are running for office. Some people are involved in libertarian concentration in the Liberty Movement here in New Hampshire. Some people are doing similar efforts in other states. Some people are introducing new technologies and new innovations to bring more freedom. Some people are promoting things like homeschooling co-ops and all sorts of incredible stuff, but they all are unified under the same thing. We are all working to make ourselves, our loved ones, and our communities freer tomorrow than they are today. And I want to applaud you for that, because that is incredible. That is great that you were doing that. In one word, what would you say? And I'll ask you, if you can put it into one or two words, what does liberty mean to you? What does libertarianism mean to you? Self-ownership, respect, justice, property rights, consent, truth, voluntary. These all boil down to the same thing. We want to be free. And our ideas make the most sense. That's why we agree with them, because we're the smartest people and we know that we're right. And the reality is, there's only, our ideas make the most sense when they're implemented, they do the most good, and we see the nasty, terrible alternative that happens with the status quo when they don't do libertarianism. And there's only one thing in the way of us spreading liberty here and around the globe. It's just this small little thing. Other people. It's this one just little thing. It's almost not even worth mentioning. No, the reality is most people aren't libertarian yet. Now, many of them will never be libertarian. And they believe the same nonsense that a lot of us used to believe at some point. They believe that the problem is freedom, or that we're too free, or too much freedom is going to cause problems. They believe that one half of the ruling class is creating all the issues, and the only one that can save us from them are the other half of the ruling class. They believe all sorts of nonsense, and the reality is, because they're the majority, even though their way doesn't make sense, their way goes. So what do we do when we deal with people who are just so wrong? How do we deal with other people? Well, I think it's very clear. We tell them they're wrong, we argue with them on the internet, and then we make memes about how stupid they are. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. No, that concerns me how many of you applauded that. Look, I like catharsis as much as the next guy, and there are plenty of memes I made that maybe didn't help spread liberty, but they certainly made me feel better about what the argument I just had. But the reality is that's not what brings people here. I'm going to actually prove that right now. How many people here used to be a statist? Yeah, that's most. You'll notice my hand is raised. That's most of us. I think we very often, we look at many other of the so-called normies out there, the public out there, and we go, oh, look at what they're saying. They're never going to understand what we're trying to explain to them. I have presented them so many good arguments, and they're just not immediately adapting or adopting any of them. But the reality is, we used to say that stuff. Most of the people in here used to parrot the same nonsense. I was a neocon interventionist. I said stuff that I rarely hear other neocons say. That's how bad I was. I mean, I was a cringy neocon. But the reality is, someone was able to reach me with that message. Now, some people here are advocates of the libertarian concentration strategy. We need to just, it's a great strategy. We need to get libertarians here. We need to get as many of us here, and we can make changes here. Some of us are more along the lines of trying to evangelize the liberty message. There is a false binary that you have to choose between those two. In fact, both of them work best together. You're not going to get a concentration of libertarians if you don't have libertarians. So you've got to get that message out there. And frankly, even if you evangelize to the world, if you don't get them concentrated into areas and make changes, you're not going to get your way either. So I don't think we should be arguing about that. I think what we should be doing is looking at what brings people to liberty. And I believe that we have found a way to distill not just the message behind liberty and the principles and the ethics behind liberty, but a way that we can move forward to liberty down into one word. Here is that word, respect. Case in point, who here is against respect? There's usually at least one edgy person who raises their hand, but even among, and there's some edgy people here, not even one of you said you were against it. But I'm going to go even further. In order for us to be here right now, just to get from our home to here, we had to come into relatively close contact with hundreds, thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of people. In fact, I probably had to come into relatively close contact with 50 to 60,000 people because I had to go to 3 different airports to get here. And at no point did any of us feel any sense of immediate impending danger on our way here, even though almost everyone that we have had to be in close contact with just to get here, we had no idea who they were. They're total strangers. We'll probably never see them again. We have no idea what they value. We have no idea what their opinions are on things. We'd probably hate their opinions if we heard it. We'd probably, listening to them one time, we'd probably say, wow, I hope you don't vote. But regardless, we still had a reasonable expectation that we were going to get here safely. And they more than likely had a reasonable expectation that they were too, even though they don't know a thing about you, and here's why. Just about every single one of us has an intrinsic respect for every other person as an individual human being. We don't necessarily like that person or know anything about that person or agree with them on anything. And in fact, if we did know them, we'd probably hate them, or there's a good chance we'd hate them. But we still respect that they are individual human beings. And so there are just certain lines that we're not going to cross. It's the same reason why we don't step on a human being like we would step on an insect when we're walking down the road. It's because we recognize that this is a human being. And this is something we don't even often think about. Like, it's so intrinsic that it's not even something that has to be explained. You could talk to one of the kids here and say, I think that, when that a human being and another human being shouldn't hurt each other because they're people. And they'd go, well, yeah, because it's something that's intrinsic. The exceptions to that are sociopaths and psychopaths and criminals and politicians. But I repeat myself, but here's why that is. As intrinsic of that belief as that belief is, most of us here, almost all of us here, and just about everyone else, were conditioned from a very early age to set aside that expectation of human respect when it comes to the government. Now, what's the government? It's just people. It's people that have said, I'm with the government. But they're still just people. And in fact, those exact same people, when they're outside of their capacity as a government official, we still expect them to respect us. Like, let's say I'm a politician. Let's say I'm in government. I'm actually an elected official. Now, outside of that capacity, I'm just walking down the road wearing my regular clothes, and I walk up to one of you and I say, give me half of what's in your wallet right now, or I'm going to make your life miserable. And I might give some of it back to you if I think you need it. Now, are you going to say, okay, that sounds good, or no, that violates the social contract, or no, you're either going to fight me, or you're going to run away, or you're going to call for help from someone, or if you do comply with me, it'll be under duress. It'll be because you didn't want to get hurt, right? As, imposing and threatening as I am. You did it, if you did do it, it wasn't because you thought it was a good idea. But if I now put on a suit and I stand behind this podium as an elected official and I say, I have fantastic news for everyone. I am going to introduce a new program that is going to help so many of you. But if you need it, I'm not just going to give you money because you want it. It's only if you need it. Now, to pay for this plan, I'm going to introduce a new tax. We're going to have the same general reaction to that as we would to someone actually walking up and robbing us, because we get that scam for what it is. But the vast majority of people, whether or not they agree with that plan, whether or not they agree with that new tax, they're going to treat it differently, because that's not theft, that's government policy. It is that set aside of that expectation for human respect that allows tyranny to reign, because the vast majority of people don't see it for what it is. Now, what we are able to do by distilling it down to human respect is by reminding people of that intrinsic respect that we're supposed to have for one another. Now, many of you are doing this in all sorts of different ways. I've seen all sorts of incredible things that you guys are doing here. I can tell you about the way I'm doing it, and that's with my organization, You Are the Power. And here's what we do at You Are the Power. We find people that are being disrespected, and instead of just saying that this is a terrible thing, we come up with a call to action, and then we encourage people to join us on it. We don't talk to people about libertarian policy or philosophy or anything else. That is useful, and many of you are doing that, and that's a good thing you should be doing, but we're actually skipping that part. We're just bringing to people an example of someone whose life is ruined or being ruined by an out-of-control government. And instead of having a moral or ethical conversation with them about why that's happening, we give them a call to action to cyberbully those government officials until they back off and do the right thing. And then we give them another one. And then we give them another one and another one and another one. And in doing so, we aren't just demonstrating what it is we're about and what we're trying to stop. We're giving them an opportunity to adopt our principles and to echo them to their social circles and to those government officials. So before I argue with anyone or try to convince anyone of anything, I just bring them a cause that I already know they're going to agree with us on and want to fight on, and I turn them into active activists in the liberty movement before I even try to get them to adopt libertarianism. Now, Now I could start talking to you about the stats and how we've worked on well over 100 causes, and we've had something like an 85-90% success rate with those causes, and I could talk to you about the how we've reached well over 100 million people with our causes and all of that, but I actually want to break it down into one example of what happened. There is a couple named Matt and Taki Hernandez. They're husband and wife, and they have 2 children, Emma and Aria. When Emma was a newborn, she started having swelling in one of her legs, and she was just fussy. And so they brought her to the pediatrician, who said, I think you should bring her to the hospital. Took her to the hospital. She had some blood work done, and she had an x-ray done. The x-ray found that she had some fracturing in her leg, and also had some old fracturing that was at various stages of healing. The blood work demonstrated that she more than likely had a chronic illness that was causing this to happen. So the child abuse pediatrician called it abuse, and they were informed that they weren't going to see their daughter. Then the police came to their house and saw, as they put it, that Aria, the older child, the toddler, lived in a fine home, and that everything seemed like they were in good order and that they were loving. So then they took Aria too, and they arrested Matt Hernandez for abuse. And as bond conditions for them to let him even seek bond to be able to get out and go back home, he had to agree to not talk to his wife or live in the same home with her or be within a certain number of feet of her until the criminal trial was over. They hadn't even indicted him yet. So not only did they steal their children, not only did the state of Georgia steal their children, they forced them to legally be estranged from one another and threatened major harm against them if they even talked to each other. Now, both of them separately immediately went and tried to get the medical records because they knew that neither one of them had abused this kid. And they found out that they were going to have to fight in court to get their medical records. So they did. several months later, and I believe thousands of dollars later, fighting in court to get the medical records of their own children, they finally got them, and immediately they saw that every bit of evidence, medical evidence that they had, showed that Emma had one of 2 or 3 different chronic medical conditions that causes this, and that she needed immediate additional testing to find out what it was so they could start treating her, because some of these conditions are fatal. And they said, okay, great, let's go to court, and the judge will see this, and let us get our kids back, and we can start giving her the treatment, the lifelong treatment she's going to need. Instead, the family court judge refused to allow the medical evidence to be put into the court case. And she refused to allow the medical experts they hired to even give their testimony. And instead, she took the word of the so-called child abuse pediatrician who didn't even see Emma, who wasn't even familiar with the case, and who under testimony said, yeah, I mean, if there's a fracture involved, it's probably abuse. And when the attorney asked what the source of his knowledge of this so-called statistic that it was abuse was, he went, oh, well, you can see this stuff on the internet. So based on a doctor who had never seen Emma once and wasn't familiar with the case saying, yeah, the internet says that's probably abuse, they ordered for the children to be placed in a foster care indefinitely with the possibility of them being put out for adoption. Now, when we first heard this case, we vetted it very heavily because I thought, there's no way that this is actually happening. Turned out that's exactly what was happening. And so we put it out there. We put it on all of our social media. We got it out to the public. Thousands of people started angrily emailing everyone involved, the child abuse pediatrician, the family court judge, the social work, the caseworker, the caseworker's supervisor, everyone down the line, even the head of DFACS. Everyone was getting angry emails and mentions on social media and phone calls, and pretty much any contact we could find, we put it out there so people could let them know firsthand what they thought of this. And then the other families started coming out of the blue from across the country, and we heard the same story over and over and over again. My kid was sick. They are fighting to let us never see them again. Some of them said we also aren't allowed to speak with our spouse or our significant other. We heard the same thing over and over again, and we vetted each and every cause and found out those ones were true too. And then we found out why this is happening. Under Title IV of the Social Security Act, the federal government pays not just these agencies, but the individuals that do the casework all the way down the line, the judge, the caseworker, the pediatrician, the foster care workers, all of them, as long as they call it abuse. And if they put the kids up for foster care, they get even more. And if they end up putting the kid up for adoption, they get even more. And if it turns out that the kid is ill, they get even more. So when these child abuse pediatricians see a kid in need of care, they don't think, wow, this child, this human being needs medical care. They think, cha-ching. All we have to do is destroy another family and traffic some more children, and we'll get even more money. Now, that is what it looks like when people are not being respected as individual human beings, because that doctor, that caseworker, that judge, everyone down the line getting this ridiculous perverse incentive funding to do this, every single one of them, they see that sick kid and they don't see a human being that needs help. They see money. They see a political opportunity. They see a funding opportunity for their agency. They see a political point to be able to say, oh, look at all these new abuse cases. We need even more personnel and even more money. If instead they looked at that kid and saw a kid, this would never happen. Now, we get that message out there, and not only are we getting the message out there and getting people to get involved and send those angry emails and everything else, but we're driving that message home. This wouldn't happen if they weren't being respected as individual human beings. And then we give them a link to a page on our website where they can contact all the contact information for all the officials involved. And we give them a wording template that they can use where it says the same thing. Respect these people as individual human beings. So now, not only are these folks getting involved with helping someone that they can actually connect with and someone that they could see as themselves or their neighbors or loved ones, but they're now echoing the message we just said. These are human beings, they should be respected as it. We are respect-pilling these people. Before we ever talk about self-ownership or autonomy or property rights or individualism or any of that, we are getting them at its core, at the most intrinsic level, to adopt something they already believed. We should all respect each other as individual human beings. And they're applying it to the government. Now that's great for the liberty movement. That's great for my organization. That's great for anyone who wants to live in a freer future, to have more people in the movement and intrinsically believing it and adopting it and doing activism on it. Let me tell you what it did for that family. Those children are on their way back home. After months of basically blocking them from being able to defend themselves in court, where they were not just innocent or guilty until proven innocent, but guilty and not allowed to be proven innocent, that judge, Heather Knox, after getting thousands of angry emails and mentions and phone calls and text messages, for some miraculous, unrelated reason, she did a complete 180 and decided to order reunification and to say that these kids should definitely be on their way back home, and that she wishes she could drop the whole thing, but the criminal charges are still pending, and dismiss the Child Protective Services case. Just out of nowhere this happened. I'm sure it's not related to entire, thousands of people telling her to change her mind. That happened because of the work that we were doing. Those children are on their way back home. We are working on getting those charges dropped. And after nearly a year of not living together or seeing their kids, Matt and Tucky Hernandez are living back together as husband and wife, and they're able to see their children who are with family anytime they want with no restrictions. And soon they'll be back in that home where they belong. That is what it looks like when we get the public behind that idea that we all intrinsically believe in, that we all need to be respected as individual human beings, but then get them up to apply it consistently, including and especially to the government. That is the message that we should be spreading. However you want to word it, however you want to implement it, whatever idea you want to bring to the public, whatever your booth is about over there, it all comes down to the same thing. When we are respected as individual human beings, we are more prosperous, we are more harmonious, and we are happier. I call it the principle of human respect. I hope you agree with it. It's what we do at You Are the Power. I'd love to have you be a part of it. If you want to come to youarethepower.net, you can sign up today and become a member. We'd love to have you be a part of this. But however you do it, I just want you to remember, that is at the core of what we are doing, respect. And when that happens, when we get public officials to respect us, here in New Hampshire, across the country, across the world, we are freer tomorrow, the week after, and long after that. We are freer with each day, the more we are respected and the more we demand it. So with that, I open the floor up to any questions, and I'm not sure how much time I have, but I figured you guys would probably rather have me answer the questions that you have instead of just blathering on forever. So you're first. Yeah, you're the first one.
I just have a couple of quick points. One, 2 days ago we had a Soho debate here, and they were basically debating something that you've made, I think, very clear. The debate was between Dennis Pratt and Gene Epstein,
okay.
And the proposition was whether it's more effective, whether you can convert more people to libertarianism by focusing on the philosophy or focusing on the utilitarian point.
Yeah.
And I wish you had been there, because you could have brought something to that.
Yeah. Well, so I think, well, first of all, they probably wouldn't let me on stage because it was their debate. But
we have a Q&A.
No, I know. I will say this. I think it's a false binary again. I think that the philosophy and the utility of it go hand in hand, right? Like a principle that makes sense is one that both makes intuitive sense and that you understand and that actually works, right? Like I can present some, think of all the bad ideas that might sound good when you first hear them, but the moment you start actually thinking about how to implement it, you realize how utopian it is and that it's never going to work. If it doesn't make sense, then it's not going to work. And if it doesn't work, then it sure as hell doesn't make sense. So these debates are useful. I'm certainly not saying they shouldn't have them, but I will say I believe a lot of what we argue over are false binaries that we engage in to, because we're libertarians and we like to make our point, and that's fun. But I do think that there's not necessarily needing to choose between the philosophy and the utility. We're doing both. We start with here's the impact of this, because that's how most people think. Most people are very much herd-like in their thinking. We are the reason we call them normies is because they're normal. We're the weird ones. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's nothing wrong with being unusual ones. Unusual people are the ones that make all the change. Think of all the people that have changed history for the good. How many of them are people you'd consider normal? Like none of them, right? Like it's good that we're out of the ordinary, but we need to understand when we're talking to the public, they are very much in the ordinary. They are very much looking for consensus around them. We actually kind of hate consensus. We will fight each other just to have something to fight over. And that's what makes us so wonderful, but they seek consensus. Does this make sense to everyone else? They seek utility. Is this, does this seem like it's gonna work? But mostly just more seeking consensus. When we do what we're doing, we're showing not just does it make sense, not only does it work, but look at all these other people that are joining us. We've made the consensus. Come join us. So I don't think we have to choose between them, but thank you for asking that.
The other thing.
Exactly.
The other thing was you are obviously in favor of what you've characterized here as the concentration of liberty.
I love it. Yeah.
Do you think it would be valuable for us to advertise ourselves as the first libertarian concentration camp here?
Oh, yes. Well, you know, when I jokingly, and I assure you it was jokingly, I was asked if I wanted to stay on the camp when I came here, and I went, I don't know, my people haven't done the best with camps. But I'm Jewish. Anyway. So thank you. Now, I made as bad a joke as you just did. Thank you. Hey, man, how are you doing?
Hi, Spike. So I love this idea. It's so great actually getting activists who aren't libertarians to be pushing early on on these things.
Yep.
And as you know, libertarians are oftentimes the first people in on these types of human rights violations.
Correct, yes.
And I've been doing this for decades, and and I get so excited, and we're really going to win, and we're going to demonstrate to these people. But the trouble is that there's this point at which they actually get enough power that they go, hey, we can actually force more if we use the state. And I've seen it over and over again. I go, hey, gay dudes, that's not what we're doing. How do you get them to stop, to stop at that point? Now, I think that's great. I mean, just the activism itself is fantastic. And I think also that we'll be catching those few people who can become libertarian, who actually understand that respect means, hey, I can get respect by having the state point a gun in my favor. Right? That's respect too.
Which is why it's important for us to delineate what it is we're talking about.
Right.
I'm not saying respect me and respect what I'm about and respect my ideas and respect. I'm saying respect the fact that I am an individual human being. Now, whatever the enforcement mechanism is to punish people who go outside of that, whether we're going to do it through a state-based justice system or through an anarcho-capitalist contractual society, that's another argument to be had. But the reality is, all of our ideas of affirming and defending life, liberty, and property boil down to respect. If you aren't respecting someone as an individual human being, that's the first step to then aggressing against them. Like, it requires that disrespect in your actual action. You're demonstrating it. So to go back to your other question about how we deal with that, when we're trying to concentrate and get power, how we don't allow it to take us over. That's the tale as old as time. It's why so many of us are ANCAPs, because we're like, hey, the goal needs to be decentralization. If there is even a temporary getting of power, it should be with the idea of decentralizing that power. If you're running for a certain office, you might be running for it to say it should be abolished, and that while you're sitting in there, you're going to nullify as much as you possibly can. So I will say, part of why I am less and less involved in electoral and party politics is I watch what it does to people. This is not specific to the libertarian. No, I wasn't waiting for an applause, but thank you. I was trying to figure out how to say this without sounding like I'm dumping on the Libertarian Party, because this is not exclusive to the Libertarian Party. It's just what I've seen most up close. The reality is, the reason you got libertarians fighting each other, even though they agree on so much, is that the democratic process in and of itself and the allure of the power that comes with being the vice secretary of the such and such county Libertarian Party, it encourages, incentivizes, and necessitates that we immediately look for each other's differences and then amplify them. Because if we have to decide who's going to run something and then have a democratic vote on who's going to run it, then that requires us to contrast one another. Like, even if me and you are running for chair of the party, okay? Or we're running to be the nominee for whatever office. We're running to get libertarians to vote for us. Even if we agree on 99.9% of things, by necessity, we have to find that 0.1% and focus on that, because that's the only way I can say why you should vote for me instead of you, and vice versa. It's the only way you can say why they should vote for you instead of me. And so what ends up happening over time is I disagree with them on this becomes it's so important that we talk about this to this person is an existential threat to the party, and if they win, then we should all leave. And so inevitably, we create our own duopoly. And the same rhetoric, the things that we say about each other are the same things that Republicans and Democrats say about each other. I want to remind everyone of something. The duopoly isn't there because it's the best way to run things. It's there because it's the best way to distract us from what they're doing. So if we do it internally, we're literally choosing to distract ourselves. So to go back to your question, I don't know that there's a good way for us to get power, to hold the ring of power without letting it corrupt us. I think the only shot in hell that we have of actually doing so is by making sure that our North Star is respect for the individual, and from that, all of our principles: decentralization of power, individualism and individual rights, property rights, non-aggression. And the moment we start to stray from that for pragmatic reasons or for anything else, that is the moment that we are beginning to become what we hate. And we should actively reject it. I would rather it take much longer for us to get elected than for us to get elected sooner and discover when we get up there that we're willing to compromise everything. I'll make one final point on that. There were people that were talking about Bobby Kennedy being our nominee. Now, I like a lot of what Bobby has to say, but I also heard Bobby say at one of our conventions that the sure sign of civilizational collapse is the decentralization of government power and the privatization of government-run land. Bobby Kennedy is not a fellow traveler who gets it wrong on a couple things. He is someone who is actively hostile to our ideas, who gets it right on a few things. Now, here's why I bring up that point. I just want to know, hold on. I'm not dumping on Bobby. I'm glad he's running, and if he asked me to help him get ballot access, I would, because Americans should have as many choices as they have. The reason I'm bringing this up is there were a lot of libertarians who said, yeah, he's hostile to our ideas, but we might get 5%. We might get on the debate stage. Just think, folks, if we nominated, I say we, the Libertarian Party had nominated someone who was actively hostile to our ideas, we could have gotten on the debate stage, and millions of Americans would have been able to hear libertarianism for the first time from someone who's actively hostile to libertarianism. And not just that, no, hear me out. If you think that's amazing, wait, there's more. We might get 5%, and if we get 5%, that'll give us major party access, thereby ensuring that every single election cycle, we will be pressured to run another anti-liberty candidate to keep our status, thereby ensuring that we are an active detriment to the liberty movement. And all we would have to do to get this amazing deal is demonstrate to everyone, especially ourselves, that we don't even wait to win before we sell out. We are worse. We are worse than what we seek to replace. We'll whore out for 5%. Or let me rephrase that. We'll whore out for the possibility of 5%. That is what it looks like when we lose that North Star. When respect and individualism and autonomy and non-aggression and property rights becomes this thing that we'll do later once we win. Once we get this funding, once we get taxpayer funding, once we start doing primaries. I would much rather, if I had to choose between that and instead going and joining one of the statist parties and pushing them further our way, that's at least moving in our direction. That's a whole other argument. But so no, we need that to be our North Star. And the moment it's not, we should recalibrate. And if we're not willing to, then we should step down and stop doing it and find something else to do. That's what I did. Thank you. Mr. Friedman, hi.
You described some disturbing abuses of child abuse cases.
Yes.
Have you called these cases to the attention of the Institute for Justice? Because it sounds as though that is at least the possibility of a opportunity for litigation to establish precedents that would make such cases less likely.
Yes, so without divulging too much behind the scenes stuff, we are in talk with IJ. I also want to say I just was asked a question by David Friedman, and I just, after my opening act, Ron Paul spoke, I then get up where I get questions from David. No big deal. Yeah, I'm having a moment. Hey, man, how are you doing?
I'm doing all
Thank
right. I'm AJ Olding. Since you brought up the point of titles earlier, I'll point out that I'm the former secretary of LPNH and the current secretary of the Hamilton County Party in Ohio.
No, fantastic. No, and good. I before you ask your question, I want to say, if you are in that role and keeping that North Star of liberty, then good. God bless you. I'm glad you're doing it. And if someone else is saying, well, you know what, I joined the Republican Party to make it more libertarian, God bless you, I love that you're doing it. If you said, I'm done with all that, I just want to concentrate as many libertarians as possible so we can get freedom in our time, God bless you. Whatever it is that you are compelled to do, do it. And do it as well as you possibly can. And again, just make sure that your North Star, that your most guiding principle is what it is we do. And the second you find yourself being pulled away from it, then remember what it is you're fighting for. And if you find that you can't let yourself get pulled away from it, then step down and take some time. Find something else you can do that allows you to keep that North Star. Sorry, go ahead with your question.
So I was wondering if and maybe you can't get too in depth on this, but I was wondering if you had any further metrics you might be willing to share with us about what your organization has been doing with these I guess medical malpractice items in parental
Child trafficking,
yeah, child trafficking, right? If you've got like can you tell us okay, how many cases you guys might be working on right now? How many other kids you might have gotten back? How much money people have donated? Things of this nature. Are there any specific numbers you'd be willing to share with us as how well this is going, how hard the struggle is, what else you guys might need?
Yeah, so I will tell you, before I get into specific metrics, I'm working with organizations that have been fighting this for 20 years who are shocked we've accomplished anything. Because it is, when you put this message out there, most people have this normalcy bias of going, I don't know, maybe they really did abuse the kids. And it's for two reasons. First of all, you hear that all these people are being accused of abusing kids. There's kind of this well, maybe they did do it. Again, normalcy bias. There's also this bias of not wanting to believe that just about every state, their CPS system is basically running as a child trafficking operation that's being headed by perverse incentive funding coming directly from the federal government thanks to the money that they steal from you for the Social Security. Most people just don't want that to be a real thing. And so it's easier for them to go, I don't know, maybe they probably abuse the kids, which is why we vet all of our causes that are brought to us, eminent domain cases, zoning abuse cases, police threatening charities for helping people, all the different things we take on, we vet them very heavily. These ones, we double vet them, because if there's even a smidgen of a possibility, we've had many families come to us that it's almost certain that they're also innocent, but there was just a couple of missing things that we said, listen, we would rather not, and we tell them this, we would rather not have you as one of our causes and focus on the ones that we have all the evidence than focus on yours, and God forbid, or focus on yours or someone like yours, and God forbid it turns out to be abuse and it derails the whole thing. And they understand that, we're fighting for all of you, because we're not just, by the way, and I'll get into the metrics on this, not only are we reuniting families, we're also working with legislators and attorneys and advocates across the country to build model legislation that will fix this by removing the perverse incentive funding at the state level and force that funding to be used just to do your job, not for a specific outcome, to reintroduce due process into child abuse accusations, treat it like a criminal accusation, since you are threatening to punish them with stealing their children, and actually require due process and that criminal level of burden of proof when it comes to evidence and everything that comes with that. And also, if there is any kind of exigent circumstance to take a child, it's a very limited one, and they have to immediately show that there was a circumstance. They can't just indefinitely take a kid for exigent circumstance. So, go back to your question about the metrics. We first heard about the Hernandez family in, I believe, it was either October or November. So just over 6 months we've been working on this. We have so far gotten 2 families reunited. We are actively working on, I believe, 8 causes. There are many more, again, that have come to us that they probably are also causes that are legit, but we are very much erring on the side of caution. We have many more cases we are still actively vetting, and again, we're working on that legislation. Now, the fact that we've already had and in every one of those cases, there has been some de-escalation. Either they're allowed to see allowed to have visitations with their kids again, or bond conditions were changed so they're allowed to speak with each other, which is just insane that they do that in the first place. Or some children that were in foster care are now with other family members, or restrictions have been removed. So in just about every one of those cases, we've already seen some de-escalation. But in 2 of those cases, we're pretty much all but closed out on them, where we've just about put this nightmare behind them. Again, we've done that inside of just outside of 6 months. And from what I'm talking to, that's unheard of. And the reason isn't because we're magical and special, or I'm a really good talker or something like that. It's because we go right to the point. These people who are just like you have children that you would take, is that 5 minutes? Okay, have children that they care about just like you, and they took their kids to get help because they were sick or hurt, just like you were, and those kids were stolen, and they're being run through the ringer, and their families being torn apart, and that could happen to you. So we bring it to that person. Again, individual human respect. Even in our messaging, I respect the fact that I'm not talking to the public or the normies or those people who haven't adopted our ideas yet. I'm talking to individual human beings who care about other individual human beings in their life. And so in my messaging, I am telling them about something about family or a person, that they look at that and go, that could be me. And they become active advocates. And I'm not selling them an ideology. I'm selling them a way to fix something that they already know is wrong. And many of them are going to become libertarian at some point. Many of them won't. Many of them will continue voting for, Bernie Sanders or whatever. And that means that the worst case scenario is that we have turned our political opponents into some of our most active advocates for causes we believe in. So we're literally leveraging them for something that helps us spread liberty, even if they don't join us. Did you have a question? Okay.
Really quick, I got something I want to say, and then I got a fun question for you.
Okay.
Reason Magazine just dropped a featured article on the Hernandez case that Spike talked about. It just got published, but if you want to see and they talk about You Are the Power in our work in there. But you can, it's got the specific details every beat of the way if you want to find out more about it. But a question to give you, since you're rounding things out. I work with You Are the Power, and one of the things that we deal with in cities are cities that make it illegal to feed the homeless.
Yeah, and
how does that become a law? Where does that start, where people elected say, we need to stop people from feeding the homeless, where a man gets charged with assaulting someone with a burrito when he was trying to feed a homeless person?
Yeah.
How does that happen?
He's not exaggerating. People have been charged with doing harm to others because they gave them a sandwich. Now, they say this is for safety. They're taking these sandwiches and pouring bleach on them and putting them in the dumpster for everyone's safety, because everyone knows, if there's one thing that I know about homeless people, none of them ever possibly go into dumpsters for food and wouldn't dare think that it has bleach all over it, right? But then we found out why they're actually doing it. It's, again, perverse incentive for funding. These city governments need to spend all this money they get to deal with the homeless crisis. And the best way to do that is to have a homeless crisis. And so before they can go to some NGO or some charity and give them millions of dollars to give them this exclusive contract to deal with the homeless problem, they have to make sure none of you are fixing it for free or free to the taxpayer with voluntarily raised funding or out of your own pocket. So they threaten you with harm. Don't help people. Government hates competition. They need to, and this boils down again to human respect, and I'll close out with this. This boils down to that human respect. When those politicians see homeless people, they don't see people that could easily be them. They don't see people that are dealing with mental health issues and personal trauma and drug abuse issues, or criminal record issues, or just being on hard times temporarily, and say, wow, there's got to be a way we can help them get over that stuff if they want the help, and meet their immediate needs now and help them get back on their feet so they can be a contributing person and feel good about themselves again and help others who are in need, because they know what that's like. They look at that and they go, cha-ching. Millions. We're going to take this crisis, and the people on the left, we're going to say, look at these poor people. We need money to help them. And the people on the right will say, look at these people on the streets, and they're defecating. We need money to deal with this. They play both of sides against each other, and they use these people and put them in a position where they grandstand on their suffering so they can maximize the amount of power and money and personnel they get from it. And they do this again for one reason. They're not looking at everyone involved as individual human beings. These politicians go home, and I'm sure they consider themselves good people. They might be active in their church. They might be, active donors to various charities. They kiss their kids on their forehead before they go to bed at night, and they think that they're good people. You want to talk about the banality of evil? Show up to a local city council or county council meeting and watch as these people casually destroy people's lives and have to drink coffee to stay awake because they're so bored by the whole thing. This is not people getting together and wringing their hands and saying, what evil can I do to the world today? They think they're doing the right thing, or they just set aside that expectation of themselves that they treat people like humans because I'm just doing my job. I'm in the government and I'm here to help. It's all the same thing, but it boils down again to human respect. When we demand that they respect us as individual human beings, all of this changes. It changes because we don't put up with it anymore. And there is a Rubicon, there is a threshold we can cross. It doesn't even have to be the majority. If a significant enough number of people say enough of this, I demand to be respected as a human being, it doesn't matter which party gets elected. It doesn't matter which politician wins, because they all are being demanded to respect us as individual human beings. And so with that, I will say again, I'm going to be here for the rest of the day. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone else has. But more than anything, I am just looking forward to going back out there and seeing all the great work you guys are doing. And if there's anything I can do to help with that, I'd love to do it. Keep fighting for liberty. I love every single one of you. And thank you again.